Good evening. So, a lot of different subject matters are flowing through my mind tonight, and I figured the only way to solve it, as far as what I'm going to present, is to just leave all that scurrying around in the background and just start recording and see what happens. One phrase that keeps coming up is the hero's journey. You can look that up. It's sort of a subject matter of Jungian thought, Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, but ultimately it's a idea that each individual is perhaps, like, I guess what it's focusing on is to remind people that you're of the world, you're in the world, and you are the world. And not to get like new age on anyone, I don't really tend to lean towards meta statements and simplification of a very, if you look under the superficial and the things that we take for granted, it's a very complex situation, being a human being. And I think there's certain disciplines and cliques, to use an old school phrase, that simplify it to its detriment, actually. Almost a kind of a bias towards assumption and spiritually bypassing moral and ethical and personal conundrums and things that people avoid because it challenges their ego or it challenges their shortcomings. So they simplify it in order to deny it. And I've even encountered people who belittle the story itself, the hero's journey. It's almost a form of apathy or aloofness. But I think that in secret, those people meditate deeply on what they deny. And it's more of a defensive mechanism where when you present your story to them, they don't have room for it. And so they create some sort of philosophical, pseudo-philosophical rally against it and present you with like this hypothetical separateness from it, as if you could separate yourself from your story, and that's a higher form of existence. But even curiously enough, even when people do that as a mental exercise, that becomes part of their story. So you can't escape the story. I mean, no matter what you do, you're pinning it out on the pages of time. So again, there is no mistake. There's no escape. And So it's almost like a form of self-hypnosis, I think, when people interrogate what you're excited about, or they belittle it in some way by saying something sophisticated and profound. It's a curious mental condition that's brought on by the company of another person. Curiously enough, I doubt very seriously, yeah, if they do it to themselves, because it's it's a way of life for them, and it's something they have to maintain daily. So it wouldn't make sense for them to interrogate themselves, because then they wouldn't have anything to do. So it's been a pretty decent day. It's raining here in California, Northern California. We need it, and I'm tired. So my body is getting ready for Sandville. But I wanted to share some things with you tonight to keep my promise to myself, in a sense, to build this channel and offer voice out into the world, and whatever vibes that you get, I hope it helps. I hope it helps people regulate themselves, to not necessarily come back down to earth, because that's sort of overrated in some ways. And speaking in absolutes is not really doing anyone any favors, especially in this day and age of reactionary rhetoric. Speaking of reactionary rhetoric, I saw an interview today with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and he was flanked by these busts of Ben Franklin, and I think the other one is Abraham Lincoln. I'm not really sure. I think they change them around from time to time, but I found it, or at least now I do. Wasn't thinking about this before, but I mean, if you keep watching this channel, you'll find that I have a very kind of a, how would you put it, like a blue collar goth sense of humor. Like in sculpture, busts are, of course, the portrait of a head, and often it's only from the neck up. But if you go back a little further, there was a form of busts that were done from, say, the collarbone, like here and up, and even down to almost the sternum and up, which I prefer. I like the shoulders frame the head, and there's just a different relativity to it aesthetically. Otherwise, it looks like a severed head to me. I mean, it's kind of awkward. It feels kind of awkward, unless it's on a coin. But in the 3D, just this head. I don't know. It's unsettling as far as being a sculptor myself. You know, I have a lot of associations and my preferences, and yeah, so that's that. So it was interesting to see these two, like just these heads cut off at their necks, flanking Trump, which I felt was made a lot of sense to me, at least, as far as sometimes I feel like there's a layer underneath the obvious that speaks. Jung would call it non-coincidence. And where you get these scenes out in life that are almost like postcard designed, like someone came in and rearranged things to create a message or a metaphor, or it's like a dream in a way, like a dream image, where certain things are placed by the mind in order, well, they're placed symbolically. And if you know how to interpret the dream, you get a meaning. And oftentimes these images come through real life as well, it seems. And so I just felt like it was like a portrait of futility. Here you have a convicted felon, multi-bankruptee, Epstein class participator and enabler, a sociopath, and a genocidist, via the Palestinians in Israel. And not that Israel isn't occupying Palestine. Trump is a very dangerous rally call. But sometimes the world needs danger to shake off certain like routines that are deeply embedded and have become redundant and not useful for evolution. And since humans tend to be more routine than curious and deconstructive, like, you know, we don't like to destroy antiques, for instance. We covet the past. We don't like change. Even when the current conditions are nearly unbearable, we tend to get used to our own complaints, which I find to be spellbinding, actually. I'm not really sure. I guess I can't really think about it outside myself on like a mass consciousness level. I don't think anyone could, but I think people who are in power, that power and that position enables them to use their creative imagination to influence that outcome. Not that they themselves are that power, but the power itself resides in the office and the function of whatever that is. It's almost like a hollow deity of sorts, an autonoton, a puppet, and it doesn't have a soul or any energy until you climb inside of it. Automaton. So I'm going to play around with that inside my head a little bit. And a reporter asked him something, and it was a rare moment that I saw the, it was almost like something else was speaking through him, like his father or something. I don't, it was very strange, very out of character, but it only lasted for like 2 or 3 seconds where his voice changed. And he said something like, "You're very fresh, aren't you? We've had issues with you before." And his tonality and his focus, like this person had crossed a boundary, an invisible boundary that he guards with his very life. Like this is a boundary that is deathly. You could tell it in the voice. It was almost like when, I think it was a lady who asked the question, and I believe the question was presenting him with a challenge, like an irreconcilable challenge, like something that would dismantle him and prove that everything that he is projecting is utterly worthless and a lie and a front. And he knew that, like something in him intuitively or instinctively knew that there's a dove in the black slate temple, and this thing has got to get, we got to get this thing out of here. It's clashing with the decor. And he shut her down really quick. But his tonality, his voice is really what, like, you could feel the temperature of the room drop by like 50 degrees. Very peculiar, almost like a tiny little paranormal event occurred to deflect that question and then refocus the attention on her, that she's the problem, right? Classic Trump, classic politician, when backed into a corner that they're paid to maintain, and don't, when, you know, the pedal hits the metal and a citizen reaches out across the human divide of classism and day-to-day commonality, the serfdom, and engages with this ego that poops and pees like every other human being, and is just wanting a connection, just some common sense humanity. And it's not there. Not an ounce, not a gram. It's it's a very strange thing. The choices we make and the offices people fill. One theater scene to the next, and rugged, abysmal careers that you know it's a lie and you can't do anything about it. Outside of, I guess, people do their best in those circumstances. And, they have children, spouses, rent, food, taxes, curiously enough. And who knows where that disenchantment and disappointment and angst will lead them. So maybe they're in a kind of a pressure cooker of sorts, and it's not a means unto itself, that it will launch them into the next stage of their hero's journey. So I try to remind myself whenever I find myself judging or reacting to something, that a person is never the same 60 seconds later, in the sense of what choices they could make, what revelations may come to them, what accidents may come to them, how they may be humbled against their will, circumstances, surprises, dreams, nightmares, nervous breakdowns, deaths in the family. All kinds of things happen to people every day, every minute, that forces them to bend and wield, no matter what the ego, how much the ego thinks it's in charge of its fate. So it's kind of like the metaphor of someone polishing a suit of armor addictively every day, keeping it mirror shiny, so they can see themselves in it walking past it. And they do this for decades and decades and decades. And one day, they decide to go on vacation, and they come back, and the suit of armor, after a week, it's in a heap. And they notice that it's been rusting from the inside out. And all the joints finally just gave up during that week that they were gone. I mean, it would have done the same if they were there, but ultimately, this is what happens with the ego. It polishes itself from the outside, and all the while, through this polishing, it denies the inside, its conscience, its sense of dignity and courage and honor and principles and ethics and morals, its value, its self-value, and so thus the rust begins. And I mean, eventually everyone's armor will be in a pile by default. But the circumstances of that pile will be very different for each case-by-case situation. So I'm going to read you a poem. I'm going to dedicate this poem to the school children in Iran who were struck by an American Tomahawk missile in the beginning of the Israel U.S. State Department, Mossad illegal attack on Iran. 'Attack 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 on Iran. ' I find it deeply I don't have a word for it. And that's saying something. A lot of people will say tragic and horrifying, but the scale of the loss and the inhuman conceit and selfishness and disregard for life. It is truly perplexing, just utterly utterly, and that's it. I mean, I've been close to the Gaza genocide and infanticide, and from day one, deeply involved in it, and seen a lot, read too much in some cases. Israel and the United States, Britain too, in a sense, G7, classism, are not only genociding children and mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers, nieces, nephews, cousins, aunts and uncles, and everything else in between. They're starving children to death as well. I mean, this is happening and has been happening as a collective punishment throughout African communities as well. And wherever the West wants something and can't get it, sanctions are applied. So they sanction it out of the person or people. There, I read something yesterday that an ICC, ICJ official was sanctioned as a kind of punishment for keeping Netanyahu on the wanted list as a fugitive, a war criminal and fugitive. The shadow doesn't like candlelight or any kind of light for that matter. So here comes the poem. I wrote this June 4th, 2012. I found it in some paperwork. I haven't written poetry in a long time. So I don't have anything real recent, but I stumble upon these pieces from time to time and thought it would be good to share a little different side of where I come from and a few of the different worlds that I partake in. So again, this is dedicated to the school children in Iran that were mass murdered by Israel and the United States as a first salvo attack, a statement to the men of Iran. I'm quite certain that it was meant as a psyops gesture of shock and awe, and was meant to humiliate and enrage the collective masculine of Iran, and all that implies. It's like spitting in someone's face while they're behind bars and they can't get to you. You know, it's that kind of evil. So here's the poem. To lift the white blanket. To lift the white blanket, floating on the aqua green stream away. To reveal starfish living, breathing the cliff side in, like a cannon breathes battle and faded glories. To reach into midnight's mouth and dive deep into the sun of suns, looking for the pot maker of those pots of gold at the ends of double rainbow roads. To play in the fields of black corn and yellow crows calling, singing the songs of Jupiter and Atlantis rising, to meet the lips of Venus, always kissing, song singing. Stay now, said the contented mouse to the kernel of corn. Stay now. Under this tuft of dirt, grow, be my tower of promise, my mast of procreation fuel. Blue turtle captain, white dove of plans gone and dreams rewritten, always on time, always true. To watch the gray-blue mist rising from a baby bat's breathing quest, to explore the crystal cavern upside down with its right side up dreaming. These children in Iran, I think humanizing is difficult for a culture that is so steeped in materialism and day-to-day pressures, especially when it's not the status quo to be resistant to mainstream media and or agreeing with what people compromise in order to belong. And maybe I'm assuming, maybe I'm simplifying things a little too much, because ultimately, if you take each individual outside of the obvious, that they belong to society and they are doing what comes with their job, the job is expendable. In some regards, they doing the job is expendable, but we don't see the private side of what they're experiencing in their hero's journey. And when I use the word hero's journey, I have no intention to romanticize anything. I think that the Jungians and the people who are really into Joseph Campbell and these cliques that kind of form around these deceased gurus, parasocial relationships existed before the internet, by the way. And they exist in projecting into a hero that is more than often not. They're no longer around, and or they're so far away that they might as well not be around. Too far to know, but close enough to assume, and assign qualities that they may not even have. So I try to give in my own thoughts people, even though I don't agree with them, and I find their pursuits dangerous and naive, lacking sympathy and compassion and morals. I try to also see them beyond that, and that there are things going on under the surface that I don't know, and that they're in a birth canal of sorts. They're struggling and they are caught up in something, and whatever it is that they think they know, and whatever they're on about, that they present as rock solid. I know just through my own journalism that everything is transient. Even the sun is going to eventually run out of fuel. So it's, and when I say everything, I don't mean like quarks and the baseline elements of the universe. I just mean the human existence. This motherboard of sorts, or what we've created to reflect ourselves or be reflected by. It's a stage that will burn to the ground eventually, figuratively and realistically, especially if you live in California. So it's, but these relativities are most of the time people pay them no mind. Like if we had like a permanent fixture in our day-to-day thought patterns that reminded us of the transience of life and that we could die at any moment, the world would be a very different place. It would be like a form of intuition. Not that you would be walking around with like a psychological disorder, feeling like impending doom is going to pounce on you at any time. Just a deep, deep sense of like not doubt, but and not appreciation. You may or may not kind of get what I'm saying, but I am looking for a word or a phrase to sort of underscore it. Something that would pronounce itself and would be able to achieve a situation where a person could stand back a little bit behind their words, get out in front or back up and be able to see the thoughts and feel the feelings before they're expressed. Like a behind the stage position. And appreciate how fragile life is and how utterly devastating quick decisions, judgments, ethno-supremacy, displaced anger, displaced judgment, displaced vengeance, how insulting that is to your own character, your own possibilities, and how much of a waste of time it is when other choices are right there. And who's to say? I mean, I'm not going to go back on that waste of time thing. Although maybe I will. I mean, it just depends on how you look at it, I guess, how urgent that decision is. And if you know you can make the right decision and you don't, and it's urgent, it's happening right now. There's a millisecond where perhaps it is a waste of time, but also perhaps it creates a circumstance that utterly destroys you and teaches you a lesson that you'll never have to learn again. And that could be through losing your mortality or being critically injured or simply paying a price that your ego would never dream of, but you have to do it. So I guess the waste of time is sort of up for grabs in a way. Maybe a better phrase would be remorse of conscience, where when you feel that remorse and regret, and you can't apologize to yourself enough, that's where you feel the waste. But the waste of time is time. It takes time to waste time. And that the quality of that waste is a teacher. It teaches people things. it also destroys people. Some people can't get past that, and they have to just crawl right in there and incubate, whatever that means for each individual. So I'm going to show you something that I made. Introduce some of the, well, one representation of a sculpture that I made to end this podcast, broadcast, sharing. So ever since I was a little kid, I've been interested in bones and deceased life, let's say. I don't like to use like Hollywood, I see dead things kind of, I mean, it's sort of trite and kind of belittles things. It sort of sums it up too quick. It just fascinated me as a child, the remains of life. They became like artifacts of sorts, or like a fascination to me, to find a bone or an old anything, an old rusty hammerhead, as in a carpenter hammer, not a hammerhead shark. An old carburetor from a Model T. You know, anything that had the patina of experience on it. It fascinated me to no ends, and still does, but not as much as it did when I first discovered it. One of the first things I saved up and bought when I was a little kid was a metal detector. And if I didn't have to eat, I would probably have never come back home. So off I went with it, and oh boy, you know, it was a whole new world, underground. I mean, the stuff I was normally finding, of course, was the obvious, because there was a creek behind my grandmother's house, and it would flood, and of course it would bring debris down from who knows where, and I was always finding all kinds of things and digging up stuff too. But the metal detector was a whole new level of forensic addiction. So I sculpt, and I sculpt with microcrystalline wax, and sometimes I add some found objects, but mostly just microcrystalline wax. And I'll show you some of that in some future point in time, and explain why I sculpt in that material versus, say, clay or monster clay or plasticina or marble, and give you a little bit of background, like where I come from around the fine arts and things. And I also do one-off castings. So I have a skull mold that I directly cast molten metal into, which is pewter. And these are one-offs because I add objects in to the mold before I cast the pewter into it. And so it's somewhat random. I never really know what the object's going to look like until I break open the mold. And there's only one of these in the world, and you cannot replicate it, because, again, things float around, they emerge to the surface, they get completely covered up and embedded inside the swirling mass of the molten metal. And pewter sets up very quickly. It only melts at like 400 degrees, and it's not very buoyant. So its main job is to get into the mold, push out all the air bubbles, and adhere and collectively bind itself. And whatever happens to be in the way is the way. It wraps around, adheres, encases, and then, of course, solidifies. And what I do is I go back in with Dremel tools and various cold chiseling elements, and I clean it up, polish it. I put a patina on it sometimes, brush it back, bring in like a contrast, and then sometimes I add things to it. I go back in and solder additional elements onto the piece to accentuate it in some way. And sometimes it just comes out of the mold and I finish it, and then I put an archival seal over it, something called Everbright, and that's that. I heat it up a little bit first so that there's no moisture, because pewter can absorb moisture, all metal does. And of course, moisture equals like a, it's late, so I can't find the word, oxidation. So the Everbright clear coat archival seal hermetically seals the object from moisture coming into it. And I'll go through all this process because I've discovered a way of casting that is not known in the world of casting. And so that's important to share. And, so this is called the Alligator Chieftain. And this piece is about maybe 5 inches tall, 5 or 6 inches tall by about the same wide. And the alligator vertebra I got from eBay. I think in all intents and purposes, it looks like it's something old. It was found, or, you know, maybe on the shores of Florida or something, who knows. But it was just a single vertebra that I found on eBay. And then I drilled a hole into the skull, and I put a dowel in there and run it up through where the spinal cord would be, the hole. And then I fused it like with tension, so it's set with tension. And then I went back with a soldering iron and solder, and I filled in voids around it, which you'll see, and then took a piece of red coral and made a little stem at the top that looks like a burnt out wick. And then I did some effects with the pewter, well, not with the pewter, but with the solder that makes it look like a candle had been burning. So this is it. This is a pewter one cast, a direct cast, and it has turquoise, crystal, bone, agate, a sand dollar, red coral, alligator vertebra, and this is a tribute to my fascination with the echo of life, which I feel may very well be more the voice of, or at least like a Siamese twin situation where one heartbeat, two minds, side by side, literally. So this is it. Get a good There it is. It's heavy. Bear with me here. There's the candle and the solder that's dripping down. You can see the sand dollar right there. See the little ridges right above my middle finger. That's where a part of the sand dollar came apart and left its imprint. So every accident is a good thing. Like there's nothing when it comes to things like that happening. It's a good thing. So this is front of it. It weighs about 5 pounds, I figure, 5 or 6 pounds. There's some amethyst around the teeth. And there's the underside. 2020. I think this is one of my first pieces that I did of the skull series. I've got about 12 or 13 of these. Not like this, but skulls in general. I have a thing for skulls. All skulls. And that's, there's not much of a patina on this. I mainly just cleaned it up and polished it and then bathed it in denatured alcohol so there's no residue from the polish or no oils. And then heat it up a little bit to get it warm. And then I clear coat everything. I clear coat the semi-precious stones, the coral, the bone. There's a marble there too, like in the above your left, my right. There's a marble in there, and then there's a ton of stuff inside this skull too that you will never see. I don't even know what's in there because I forget. I never did a video of it. So that's it. The alligator chieftain. Then I work out tonight. So thanks for joining and subscribe, please, and spread the word. I would love to hear from you, and if you have anything to share that's related to what I'm doing and about, happy to collaborate and connect with people. You can find me on Substack, Paradox House, and my website link is also in the description, along with things that can inform you about the history of apartheid Israel and myself. So may your hero's journey be true, even when it's false. Falsity is a teacher, and even in it, you may not know yet, but it knows you, and it's a tough love situation to be caught up in an ideology that sacrifices others' dreams for you to ultimately live a kind of soft nightmare of sorts, if you really stand back and consider what price your dream is enacting on others, innocent others as well, or just friends who are innocent, and you may lash out at them and use them as some sort of excuse to further race to the bottom of the barrel and have a nervous breakdown, lose all your friends, and curl up in a ball and have some gnomes weave you into like a gray cocoon and deposit you lovingly in a abandoned bear's den in the middle of spring, close the mouth of the cave with a mud seal, write your life story on that seal, build a little fire in front of it to bake it and harden it. Then they lacquer it. And then a few weeks later, the bear comes back, breaks the seal, gently pulls you out of there, wakes you up. And you look at each other. She's full because she's just coming home to take a nap. But there's no room in there for you. So she spares you. She just wants you out of there. It's not your hole. And you crawl away, understanding that you've been spared. And now what? What are you going to do? Good night.